So this was the book that kind of, I guess, pulled a lot of the research together and was one of the first books to get this new idea of emotional intelligence kind of a lot more publicity. And it was by a science correspondent for Washington Post or New York Times, one of the two, but he has a PhD in psychology, so he's a pretty a pretty serious scholar as well as a journalist. And in this book, he brought together a lot of the research that was going on in the 80s and 90s, which seemed to show, as the title says here, why it can matter more than IQ. So it did seem that people who were scoring more highly on these sort of early measures of emotional intelligence did seem to do better at their jobs and in their careers than people who just scored narrowly on high IQ but maybe had a low emotional intelligence. And that got a lot of people going. It also made Daniel Goleman very rich. And he now goes around the world giving incredibly well-paid talks to businessmen and leaders about how they, and he manufactures his own products, emotional intelligence testing for company employees, which now lots of companies are getting into, and so he's onto a good thing. But again, if you look at what Goleman thinks of as the 4 components of emotional intelligence and scratch the surface a bit, you might begin to wonder whether his claims are really that true. I mean, I took his claim to be, let's go back to the slide, I took his claim to be something like this, that if you have emotions, you'll make better decisions. If you have kind of proper emotions, we can qualify it in a number of ways, your decisions will be better than if you just try and make those decisions on a purely rational basis. That's what I took his main claim to be. But if you look at the sort of 4 components of emotional intelligence a little more deeply, I don't see anything in there, really, that really supports that. The first and most important of the 4 components of emotional intelligence that Goleman talks about is this self-management, where he talks about controlling your emotions and impulses. So there, that sounds much more like Plato to me. It's about controlling the emotions. Why do you need to control them? Because if you don't get reason in charge and control your emotions, your emotions are going to get out of control. They're going to make you do things you regret. So that doesn't sound like emotions are playing a particularly great role in helping you make decisions if the most important part of emotional intelligence is controlling your emotions and your impulses. So look at the second one, self-awareness, the ability to read one's own emotions and recognize their impact. Okay, that means the ability to recognize my ability to recognize my emotions as they're occurring in me, and my ability to recognize and understand how they're affecting my reason. Okay, why is that important? Because if I'm not aware of these emotional influences, I might let them influence me without criticizing them. And why is that bad? Because if I don't criticize them, I might not spot what's wrong with them. In other words, they probably do have something wrong with them. You need to be aware of those possible influences, and you need to guard against them. Again, that doesn't sound like emotions are playing a particularly helpful role in the decision-making process. Again, it sounds like emotional intelligence seems to consist of some ability to control your emotions rather than somehow simply having wise emotions that are wise in themselves. Social awareness was the third element that Goleman talked about in emotional intelligence. And he said there that the important thing was to be able to sense, understand, and react to others' emotions. Now that's surely got to be true. If you're not very good at recognizing what emotional states other people are in, and you're probably not going to be able to predict their behavior so accurately, you're probably not going to be able to respond appropriately to their behavior, and so on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you. Again, it's not saying anything about your ability to have wise emotions unless somehow that helps you to read their emotions. If you had a good emotion detection algorithm, little camera on your head that scanned their faces and read their emotions, read their expressions, told you this person's getting angry, Wouldn't that be just as good? And fourthly, relationship management, the ability to inspire, influence, and develop others while managing conflict. Again, I can't see anything specifically about having good emotions as part of that. So this whole idea of emotional intelligence sounds great. Obviously, it's a great marketing tool. But when you probe it a little more deeply, it's not really clear that there's anything intelligent about the emotions in that concept.